the Go Forth and Golf podcast, where you can listen to everything related to the game of golf. Golf tips to help you improve your golf game, entertaining interviews, discussions about the latest in golf equipment, and so much more. Now, here is your host, PGA professional Steve Goforth.
Hey, what's happening? Welcome back to another podcast. I'm so glad you could join me. And again, I greatly appreciate you pushing a play button no matter what you're doing in your life. You took the time to do it. And like I always tell you, I am tremendously appreciative. So thank you so very much. I have on the podcast again today, Russell Levenson. Now, if you listen to some past podcasts, just recently, Russ was on the podcast promoting his book, In God's Grip, where he shares God's word with the 5 lessons from Ben Hogan. Outstanding book, had an outstanding conversation. Please go out there, listen or watch that podcast. See if you have not already done so, and go purchase that book. It will really make an impact on your life. But I want to have Russ back on the podcast because he has released a new book. Now, you may be asking, Steve, what does this have to do with golf? It has nothing to do with golf. But because Russ is a friend, I'm so happy to call him a friend now. I wanted to have him back on to share this wonderful book with my audience. And listen, I have read this book. It is tremendous. Again, Witness to Belief. Go out there, check it out. Fantastic book. You will not be disappointed. And in this book, Russ has some really good conversations with some impactful people in this world. Condoleezza Rice, Denzel Washington, Amy Grant, Jim Nantz, Sam Waterson, Nikki Haley, James Baker, Dr. Francis Collins, Dr. Jane Goodall, Gary Sinise, who you may know from the movie Forrest Gump, and so many more. And what I love about this book is how he takes a deep dive into their faith. How does it affect their life on a daily basis? How do they navigate through those troubled waters with their faith? And I love a lot of the questions that Russ asked to really get down deep into what drives their faith. Again, you will not be disappointed with this book. And I wanted to share it. It was put on my heart to share this with you. And I encourage you, please continue listening or watching, because I know it can make a tremendous impact in your life. I really feel confident in that. Again, please go out there, purchase the book. You can buy it anywhere where you purchase books, or you can visit his website at russlevenson.com. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview again with Russ Levenson. Russ, welcome back to the podcast. You were on here just a few short months ago talking about a phenomenal book, In God's Grip, that you published. How is that book doing? First of all, I encourage the listener, go back and listen to that episode. Really good. Incorporated Ben Hogan's 5 lessons. How's the book going for you? How are sales? How's the publicity of it going for you so far?
Thank you so much, Steve. Well, I have an incredible publisher in Morehouse, which is out of New York, Morehouse/Church Publishing. And they keep tabs on all that. They told me it had a good launch, a pretty successful launch. And then, which was right around the middle part of April, and then they said slowed up a little bit until the summer. And then people started, evidently there was kind of another pickup. And of course, in June, we have Father's Day, and a lot of golfers crank their game back up again in the summer. So maybe that's what was going on. But yeah, I keep hearing from people, and folks will send me, they'll see it somewhere in a bookstore and they'll send me a picture, as you did the other day. And I'll hear from, I've heard from somebody who was somewhere here in Birmingham just the other day. Somebody said they just given the book to their father as a gift. And so I think personally, I had a lot of fun writing it, but I think it's a good gift book. We're coming back up on the holidays, believe it or not. And if you have a golfer in your life who's interested in the faith or who has already jumped in with both feet, I still think it's a helpful tool. But it's a lot of fun to write. And I'm kind of pondering another one in that series. But right now I've been focused on the new book, the Witness to Belief book that we're talking about.
Have you thought about a fiction book in regards to golf and faith? I got to thinking about that the other day.
Not fiction. Excuse me. I have thought about fiction book, but I'll tell you, Steve, to be honest, I love mysteries. And so I have completed what would be a church. There's some spiritual things in a mystery book, and I have a publisher who's interested, and my real editor who lives with me, my wife, is just almost finished. And the best compliment she could have given me was, "I can't put it down." She said, "I found lots of grammar and spelling errors, but other than that, I can't put it down." So hopefully we'll have that finished up and out by the summer read next summer for a beach read. So,
have you talked to any golfers and how it may have helped their golf game reading your book?
Yeah, most of the ones that I've talked with have said that they, if they have just picked it up, they just feel like, as you and I talked about in it when we met before, that it just sinks for them, if that's a good word to put it. It kind of lines up for them, and it gives them something to think about when they're out there playing or preparing to play. Or particularly, one of my hopes in that was to, which is I think one of Ben Hogan's hopes, frankly. And again, Ben Hogan was not writing from a spiritual perspective, was to try to encourage people to remember to enjoy the game of golf. And you and I were just talking about the Ryder Cup a few minutes ago, and I was listening to one of the interviews with somebody who said they I won't say who it was. He said he was very disappointed in himself, and I thought, one of the messages of that book is tomorrow's always another day. You can always go out and start again, play a fresh new game. You might have had a horrible day yesterday. It might not have won the Ryder Cup, but there's always next year for those things. There's always tomorrow for another game. So that's one of the things I have tried to encourage people to do is don't see it as something that's another burden. See it as something that's going to help you in the way you want to enjoy your Christian life, your walk with our Lord. You want to enjoy your golf game. Don't throw your club in the water.
No, it does no good.
Another chance tomorrow, or another chance on the next hole.
Yeah, I like to live by the mantra of I get to. I get to wake up today.
Right.
I get to go to the golf course. I get to hit another golf shot. I get to read this book. And you have that perspective. You tend not to take it for granted.
And usually always in beautiful places. Yeah.
I'm so glad that book's doing well for you. Please,
thank you.
If you're listening, watching, go out there, pick up this book again, In God's Grip. Unbelievable book. I've read it. I highly recommend it. And like you said earlier, Russ, great gift coming up to the holidays to give someone. They will not be disappointed in this book. You have another book that you've written. It's called Witness to Belief. Talk about this book. Where did the idea come from? It's a very unique structure to this book where you're interviewing several individuals here in this book. What do you hope the readers are going to come away with after reading this new book?
Yeah, so I think we discussed the last time we were together a book that I put out again. This is a different publisher in 2023 entitled Witness to Dignity, the Life and Faith of George H.W. and Barbara Bush. And that book did fairly well, and I got a lot of endorsements. And but what kind of a surprise piece of that, Steve, is that I started hearing from people literally around the country that would write letters, and they would say, boy, I really was inspired by reading about these people that we knew publicly, but I didn't know in their private life they were faithful believers, that they went to church and they said their prayers. And when the end came, they wanted their pastor to be with them, praying with them, and plan their funeral. I mean, it was all of that. People, and a lot of people said, I'm just glad to know they were the people I thought they were. And, if they can do it, I can do it. If they can go to church, I can do it. I was getting those kinds of letters. And one guy told me, I read the book and I've enrolled in seminary this fall. And
wow.
And so, that was back in 22 and 23 and 24 came around. And I really started thinking, well, I know other people, some of them who I personally know, and others about whom I've read. And so I started reaching out to people who live in the public eye, people we would all know publicly, I think. And I knew of their faith. Some of them, as I said, I knew personally. Some, it was a cold call. And I began writing letters and making phone calls until I finally kind of wrestled 12 to the ground, I think. And they were I say that facetiously. The 12 who said yes were really, really wonderful, generous with their time. And, and as I say in the preface, for every one who said yes, I had three who said not now, or no thank you, or I'm busy, and who are you? But those who said yes were great. And I had these 12 sit downs, most of them in person, a few of them virtually, because some people were very far away from me. But even in those times, it became precious, as we can do with the virtual world now, as we talk quite soberly and deeply about the faith of everybody from Denzel Washington and Gary Sinise and Jim Nantz, who we talked about, who wrote the foreword for my other book, Secretary of State James Baker, Secretary of State Connie Rice, Ambassador Nikki Haley, Dr. Jane Goodall, Britt Hume, Admiral William McCraven. I think I said Gary Sinise, singer-songwriter Amy Grant, Francis Collins and Dr. Goodall. And they're kind of on the front. Collins is a scientist and was part of the Human Genome Project, brilliant fella. And then, of course, Dr. Jane Goodall, we all know from her care of her continuing work, is at 91 years old, trying to remind us to care for the world God gave us. So, but they're very different kinds of people, different denominations. They come to their faith in different ways. But I think, the common piece is that they do all believe. And they do all, these are Christians. And of course, I know people of other faith traditions who I think are wonderful and are friends, but I'm a Christian pastor. So I wanted to talk to Christians about their faith. And what did they do? These people who have fame, wealth, power, influence, all the things that the world holds as supremely valuable, I think, and a lot of people do. And yet they go to church, say their prayers, read their Bible, serve other people, give of their time, talent, and treasure to bless others. And my hope is that the skeptic, and of course, I think it's fair to say right now, perhaps religion in general, but certainly Christianity, to some degree is under attack, and some of it, is the criticism is fair, whether or not we're talking about a prosperity gospel hoaxer or a Christian nationalism or whatever you want to, those kinds of things that upset people who don't know our faith. Some of that's accurate, but I hope people will read this and go, oh no, wait a minute. Here are people I know from different perspectives who I admire for what they've done or achieved or whatever. And yet they're Christians. Mm-hmm. And if they can do it, maybe I ought to do it. So for the skeptic, I hope they read and think it's worth giving a deeper look. And for the believer or somebody who's already faithful, I will tell you, I left every single one of these, Steve, thinking I need to go further with my faith. And here I am, been ordained 32 years. I'm 63 and change. I've been a Christian most of my adult life. I left every one thinking I could stand to pray more like Condi Rice. I could stand to serve more like Gary Sinise. I could stand to meditate more like Sam Waterston. Every single one of them, I walked away changed personally.
Yeah, I think that's what's so amazing about interacting with others is that we learn a lot about ourselves. I think if we get to a point where we think we know everything or we can't learn anything else, that's a dangerous place to be, and knowing and talking to other people and learning about others. It's so powerful. I mean, you had all these interviewees that you did from different walks of life. You like you said, you have scientists, you have entertainment, people of entertainment, politics. Was there a common thread that you observed and how they see faith and challenges and doubts, practices, or their purpose? Was there a common thread there?
I think the common thread, which to me is to some degree less remarkable than the other piece, which is the uncommon threads. I'll come to that in a minute. I think the common thread is that they take their faith very seriously. And I was talking to somebody about the book not too long ago who said, well, some of these people are toward, in the last season of life. Well, not all of them, first of all. And for me, as somebody at 63, I think age is often just a number because I can tell you Sam Waterston can still keep, memorize lines. And so he was just producing a movie a few weeks ago. Jane Goodall touring around the world doing her work. It's just James Baker can tell you, if he were still Secretary of State, tell you what to do in all parts of the world. He was the oldest. James is Secretary Baker's 95, going on 96 next April. The youngest was Nikki Haley, 53. But I think, some of them would say I didn't have a shebang moment. The clouds didn't open for me. Some would say I kind of grew up in the faith, or some would say it was not until later in life that I realized how important my faith was. I had a crisis in my life, or something like that happened. Denzel Washington grew up the son of a preacher man, so to go along with the song, but he was always a man who knew about the faith. But the older he's gotten, the more important his faith has gotten, has played a role in his life. And as he says in the interview, that when we sat down, he said, for me, as the older I get, and he just turned 70, and he said, the older I get, the simpler life gets. He said, I don't need any more money. I don't need to be in any more movies. I don't need any more Oscars. He said, I want more of God. That's what I want. I want more and more of God in my life. And when I told him, some other folks had declined the invitation because he was so generous in receiving the invitation and in the time we spent together. He kind of laughed and said, well, I'm not on my way up. I'm on my way out, and I want to go down for the record. So,
wow.
But I think, humility, and I will say that's one of the things that Denzel Washington says. He said, part of being an authentic human is to be a humble person. And I was struck by the humility of these people, some of whom I knew, so I was comfortable with, but some I didn't know at all. And yet they would be very generous. And the more we would talk, as you probably discover in your podcast, sometimes the more you talk with somebody, the more comfortable they get with you, the more transparent they'll be. And so I'd say at least in 3 or 4 of these, there were moments when we were in tears, both of us, not just the interviewer, but the interviewee. And I prayed with all of them, laughed with all of them. And then, some of them were honest and transparent enough to say, well, I've never told anybody this before. So there are a couple of moments like that in the book as well.
Well, life brings demands, pressures, temptations, and these individuals that you interview, they all are in the public life. I mean, everybody sees them. And what did you notice about how their faith and their vocation just intersected, and being a public figure and dealing with the struggles that they have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would, and again, it's interesting because some of them I asked the same question, probably like you do on your program. Some of them, as we talked, I would kind of say pivot and I'd kind of go in a different direction. And Amy Grant, who just went back on tour, she's got a new album. I guess we still call them albums. She's got a new set of songs out, and she just went back on tour September and October, and she was off tour for a while because she had a really tough year. She had a bike accident, and part of that was having a traumatic brain injury, and she struggled with her memory for a little bit and had to get a lot of kind of get back on track. But she says something interesting, and we talked about it in the interview. She said that bike accident was certainly not planned. She and a friend were going out on a bike ride one afternoon, and she said right before the accident happened, she was thinking, my life is just kind of crazy right now. There's so many things going on, so many different directions in my life, so many pulls on me, and then she has this accident, is knocked unconscious, comes to the hospital, comes out, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly the words, but she said the first thing that she said was she looked at her friend and she says, here I was with my face banged up and, my head banged. And she said, the first thing I said was, I needed this. I needed this.
Wow. What a perspective.
So I needed to be stopped and get a chance to reassess and kind of look at my life. Sam Waterson, who I've known for about 10 years. There's no dark story about Sam Waterston. You can go search the web if you want, but you're not going to find anything. And he and his wife have been married since the 70s, a lovely woman. And he and his wife invited us to their home, my wife and I, to their home for a few days to do this interview. And I'm struck by his humility and his approachability. And, if you've ever watched Law and Order, Sam Waterston's there, but he's also in The Killing Fields, an incredible movie, The Great Gatsby, a lot of other programs and movies and films. But I said, you haven't let this go to your head. I said, I hope I can say that. You don't appear to be your typical Hollywood figure. And he said, well, and he credits his wife. He said, you can't beat being lucky in love. He said, I love my wife and we have a great marriage. And he said, another decision I made is I didn't move to Hollywood and I didn't move to New York. I didn't live in those places. He lives on a goat farm up in the Northeast, and
Nice.
in a very modest home, I might add, because we stayed with him. A modest home for somebody in that field of work. And then he also talks about, and Robert Redford had quite an impact on him. Of course, Redford just died a few weeks ago. I reached out to Sam to express my sympathy, and Sam said, yeah, he really was a big voice in my life. And early in his career, of course, they were together in The Great Gatsby. And Sam was very young, and Redford was certainly, his star had already risen, and other people were in that movie. And Redford calls Sam over one day and says, so what do you think about all this? And Sam goes, well, this is incredible. Here I am in this great movie with you and Mia Farrow and all these other people. And he goes, well, just remember, it's going to end. It'll all go away. This is one movie, and I'm not saying exactly right, but Redford reminded him that a lot of people in the business just want you for that, and that's not a lasting, enduring quality of life. And so I think then to learn, as I did, that Sam goes to church every week. He meditates in prayer twice a day, 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening. That alone was, when we finished, I turned to my wife and I said, oh, I got a long way to go. So, and most of that is meditation, simply being quiet before the Lord. He's not coming with that laundry list that so many of us do. Right. But at the end of the day, his prayers include, if I may say, a mantra, the repeated prayer, and he just prays the word Maranatha, which it means come, Lord. So he says, I said, so for 30 minutes, you sit before the Lord and just pray, come, Lord. And he said, yeah, and brings me a lot of peace. So,
you and I were talking before we went on air about social media, and how, it can consume us, and we don't sit in quiet time enough. I've started noticing about myself, like the first thing I do when I get up is I will grab my phone and what's going on Facebook and Instagram. And I find I feel worse in doing that, as opposed to having my time with God when I first start my day, or that quiet time that you're talking about, inviting God in. It's amazing what that does. And you're not distracting your mind from all this other stuff.
Yeah, I'm struck by the many places in the gospel, but there's a great verse about the scripture says that Jesus often, I'll emphasize the word often, went out to places alone to pray. I mean, here's the divine Son of God. You would think he had it all together, and but no, often he would go alone and spend time with our Heavenly Father. And in much the same way, if he can do it, we should be doing it. And I have to fight it too. It's not just social media; it's the latest news program. I don't watch as much news as I used to because it's so troubling right now. But I certainly, what's the new film that came out? New TV show my friends are watching. We can really busy ourselves into oblivion if we want. And I think busy is good, especially when you're my age. You don't want to be not busy. But at the same time, you've got to have that Psalm 46:10 verse living in your head. Be still and know that I am God. It's one of my favorite verses. And but I have to go back to it myself.
For readers who maybe they don't identify as a Christian, or they're skeptical of organized religion, how do you hope this book is going to speak to them, if at all?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to hold up the book. Is it Witness to Belief? And one of the things I will say, so here's the cover and the front. And one of the things you'll notice is everyone's smiling. If I turn it over, all the people who are on the cover, everybody's got a smile on their face. And so again, our faith, a lot of people think Christians are boring and grumpy and mean and judgmental. And I found in each of these conversations, I found myself laughing. We were laughing at things. We were smiling a lot. Dr. Jane Goodall talks a lot about when she was a young woman, she really her faith really came alive when she was a young teenager for her. And it's had different seasons of life and different transition points. She's had some very challenging things in her life. And I would encourage people to read her books. A Reason to Hope is an incredible book by Dr. Goodall. But she said when she was a young woman, somebody approached her one day and said, you look like you always got some kind of secret because you're always smiling. And she said, I did have a secret. I knew God. That was my secret. You know, it meant a lot to me. Sam Waterson again says that, you know, when I say to believe in God is just to admit the truth. But at the same time, and it's very important, I know Sam would want this said if he were sitting here, each person said everybody doesn't have to believe the way I do. We all come to it in different ways. And Sam believes, as do I. Here I am following the actor as the theologian, but one of God's greatest gifts to us is freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom not to choose, freedom to follow, freedom not to follow. And Dr. Collins, and this is not a secret, but we talk about it, and he's written about it. Brilliant scientist, atheist until his young adult years.
Yeah, I found that interesting when I read that.
And yet here he's been a Christian for years, and then sadly, tragically, his daughter was assaulted when she was a medical student. Yeah. And I said, but you know, a lot of people at that point would throw up their hands and leave God behind. He said, yes, it was a very hard time and very hard to understand, but where do you go?
Yeah.
You know? And he said, I had to rely on my faith to get through that. And now he says, now I watch my daughter remarkably care for young women who've been assaulted. And so
I remember, yeah, no doubt. I remember something he said in the book about how he, you know, studied science, and he started coming to the realization that, listen, I think there's something else out there, someone else out there that could be a lot more powerful to make all of this happen. And that's kind of what led him to his journey of getting closer to God and learning more about God and his faith. And I thought that was very, very interesting, considering the fact he was an atheist. He just strictly focusing on science, but yet all the things he was studying led him to believe, hey, something else out there might have done this.
Right. Yeah, and I began with him for that reason, because really his study of the created order, if you will, kind of helped bring him to faith, along with a woman kind of one day asking him, one of his patients, what do you believe, Dr. Collins? He said, well, suddenly I was on thin ice. I don't know what I believe about all that. And then he did come to faith slowly and surely. And I ended with Dr. Goodall, because here again she said, I'm not a scientist, I'm a naturalist. And she really experiences the presence of God in creation, as does Secretary Baker. If you ask Secretary Baker, who was in church every week when I was in Houston, but he said, the place where he really feels the presence of God is when he's out walking on his ranch in South Texas. So that's when I feel the presence of God. But Dr. Goodall, and I'm giving away a little bit of something here, but it's a great interview, powerful interview, and yet she talks about her next great adventure, because she was asked that in one of her talks a few years ago by one of these bright-eyed students. What's your next great adventure, Dr. Goodall? And she said, well, death. they kind of stood back, and she said, well, if you believe in life after death, which I do, what could be, how exciting that is to look forward to. What's better than this? Wow. But I think the thing, Steve, and this is really important, again, I'm struck by the fact that these folk, they have a lot that the world has to offer, but they've also, many of them have had very difficult challenges. Gary Sinise's son had died just a few months before we sat down. It was a very hard time in his life. He and his son, Mac, were very close. And of course, I know it challenged him. He had a lot of questions for God during that time. Mm-hmm. But he watched his son's faith grow. And as and Gary talks about really the turning point for him was right after 9/11. And he said, up to 9/11, my whole life had pretty much been about my career. And then 9/11 happened. And he said, where we were at the time, there was a church service. And I went to that church service, and I was really challenged by the priest, Catholic priest. He said, what are you going to do to make a difference in the world? And he said, suddenly I realized I'd been blessed in so many ways. Now it was time to turn the page and live a life of what he calls grateful service. And but he has to hold on to the word to get that done.
Yeah. How did you prepare for these interviews? I mean, how much of that did you just let become conversation, just kind of let it wander? How much did you push or follow when things got pretty deep in the conversation? How did you bring that out of them?
Yeah, well, and the purpose for the title, Witness to Believe. I really, and I say in the beginning, Jesus said to his 12 disciples, "You will be my witnesses." And so it's interesting that when I got through, I ended up with 12, which is a good number.
Yeah.
But worked out. It just worked out that way. I decided. I thought I'll stop with 12. But I felt like my job was not to get in the way. It was to, um, let them to be a witness, as if I were seeing the witness stand, saying, "Wow, I had this hour and a change with Denzel Washington. This is what I heard." Or I got to go spend a day and a half with Sam and Lynn Waterston. This is what I heard. And so I really wanted to let their voice speak. But yes, the reader will see there's several pages of footnotes. So on every person, I read as much in the way I could of speeches. If they had written books, I read their books. I voraciously underlined pieces that I would pull out. And then, what was hard is, you could sit all day and talk with some of these people, but how do I get to those 5, 6, 7, 12 questions that will really let them speak? And so there was a lot of research. If they gave, Denzel Washington's given some incredible commencement addresses. I watched those. Admiral William McRaven is cited as giving perhaps the best commencement address in the history of the United States to the University of Texas. And it's very short, and yet it's a powerful. It's called "Make Your Bed," and he ended up writing a little book on it. And but listen to that; it's a lot shorter than the time we're going to spend today. And you walk away going, "Wow, that's quite a message." But then to go and read his books, where he tells story after story of the ways in which he really felt the hand of God helping him, guiding him, protecting him throughout his life. And he did a lot of remarkable things. All these people did remarkable things, but I will say they are keenly aware, as Secretary Baker said to me toward the end of our interview. I said, here's a man who I greatly admire. He's become a great friend, an incredible mentor to me. So I think he changed our world. I think Secretary Baker literally defines the last 100 years, the last generation. But he said, Russ, we have no choice about when we're brought to this planet. We really don't have any choice about when we leave this planet. But what we do with the time in between, we have a lot of choice to make. And for that time, we need to look to God to help us and guide us. And he did.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Great perspective. Like when you look back on your 12 conversations, very diverse individuals, very diverse conversations, what's the primary insight that you're going to carry with you from all of these people?
Yeah, there's this great moment. I think you'll probably grab hold of something Denzel Washington allowed me to reprint. So we had his interview in July of last year, so a little over a year ago. And then we stayed in touch a little bit, and then I noticed he right around the time of his birthday, the later part of the year, he got baptized at almost 70 years old. And I thought, well, something happened. Something, I'm kind of curious what happened. And he was a believer. It's not as though this was a big moment, but he said, and so I called him and I said, can we have a bonus interview? And he said, yeah. And he was working really hard at the time. Here's a 70-year-old man who's putting in 12-hour, 14-hour days. He was in a play in New York, and he's now left for Africa to be in a movie. But he said he was in Harlem, and his father had a church in Harlem. He said, one Saturday I got up and I decided I was going to go see my dad's church. And he said, I went over there and parked and looked over, and the door was cracked open on a Saturday. So I got out of my car and I went in, and they were having a little kind of a youth scholarship day. And he said, I sat on the back row and just kind of watched. And then he did say, of course, by the end, I was giving scholarships away. And He said, but as I sat there, I thought, I really want to be baptized in this church where my father served.
Wow.
And so that happened, and it's on YouTube. People can go on YouTube. Very small crowd. It wasn't a public event. It wasn't a PR event. It wasn't a social media event, but somebody did, it was filmed. And he comes out of the baptismal waters, and it was obviously, it meant a lot to him. And the pastor invited him to say something. And I'll let people read. It's almost like a little creed. But I think the thing he says at the beginning is what I think people, I hope, will take away from this. He said, I realize God has done a lot for me. He's blessed me in a lot of ways. And he said, and he'll do that for anybody who trusts in him. He said, you may not be an actor. You may not be a famous person in the world's eyes, but trust in God, and he will do in you the kinds of things you deeply want to have happen in your life. And I think each of these people have landed in that place, and they're each people of prayer. I don't know how much time we have. I'm trying to watch your clock, and I want to be cognizant of that.
No, you're good. You're great.
Yeah, let me say one very touching moment. I really have always, and we didn't get into politics. You've got a couple of politicians here, but we didn't discuss politics other than having Secretary Rice, Secretary Baker, Ambassador Haley talk about the ways in which they turned to God for times of when they needed guidance. But one of those times for Nikki Haley was after the horrible shooting by Dylan Roof at the AME Church in Charleston, in which those 9 African Americans died in a Bible study. And of course, that was a story for America. It was a hard, terrible season. And she was governor of South Carolina at the time. And so she made a personal decision to attend each of those funerals. And she said, and this is in the interview, and I'm paraphrasing now. She said, what I didn't know is that all 9 of those coffins would be open casket funerals. Mm. What I didn't know is that the pastor was going to ask me to speak at all 9 of those funerals. I did plan on attending, but I didn't know. But I had committed to doing that personally. And she said, as I began doing that, it became so hard and in many ways haunting. She said, I began to lose sleep. I began to get anxious. I began to get, I don't know, fretful was the word she used, but she was certainly changing her life. She said, I lost 30 pounds in that short period. And wow. My friends noticed. My friends were getting worried about me. Definitely my health was impacted. I was doing the right things. I was seeing a therapist. I was actually getting medication. I was going to my pastor, all those things that you want to do. But she said, but there came a moment, Steve, and I thought this was quite powerful. And so there came a moment, and then she stopped, and she started to weep in our interview. And then she said, I'm sorry. And I said, please don't apologize. I mean, anybody would understand. She said, but I came home one night having all of this on me. And I closed the door. I fell down on my knees and I prayed, Jesus, you are going to have to get me through this. You're going to have to get me through the rest of this. And she said, and he did.
Wow.
A lot of us have those moments. Remember what Lincoln's favorite phrase about prayer was that were, I can't tell you how many, I keep paraphrasing the former president, how many times I was driven to my knees in prayer because I had nowhere else to go.
Right.
And we all have those moments with our marriage, with our friendships and our job, facing a chronic or terminal illness, the death of a loved one. The world isn't going to fix those things, but doing what these 12 people do in their daily lives, that's what brings you through.
What do you hope this book will do in the world for churches, for unbelievers, and for Christians?
Yeah. There are a variety of denominations here, and I remind people. I think I believe this. Everybody may not agree with me, but I say at the beginning that the Christian faith, and again, I have great friends who are Jewish clergy people, and I have Muslim clergy friends who. In fact, when we were in Houston, we used to all get together for prayer services. But I said, but nobody can preach. So we just get together and agree in prayer that we're going to pray. But But I said, Christianity at its core, and again, I'll say, because of the time in which we live, when Christianity's kind of taking it on the chin a little bit, if not a lot, it's not primarily about a religion. It's not primarily about an institution. It's not a political movement. It's not reserved for one demographic or one race or one area of the world. Christianity at its core is a relationship. And it is a relationship with God in Christ. And my hope, if it does get out into the world, if it gets beyond the borders of the U.S. or beyond the borders of the Southeast, where you and I live, my hope is that people will be reminded they're wonderful. I live in this world. Was my vocation for my entire adult life as a priest. So I do love the church. I do worship in the church. I value church and those things. But it's not about that. Those are the conduits through which we're able to be in a personal relationship with Christ. And that, in the end, is what our faith is about. I think if people can find that, they'll find true meaning and purpose in life. And I will say, and I'm going to say something about the time in which we are again. The church, one of the statistics I quote, Stephen, here is that it's estimated, we're not getting out numbers and pads, but estimated close to 50,000 different Christian denominations by the end of 2025. 50,000.
Wow.
And I can tell you, all of those are there because people divided over something. I don't know what it was, but it was divided over something.
Yeah.
That was not our Lord's intention, I don't think. And so I love pointing people back to that last night when Jesus is with his apostles and he said, he washes their feet. This is before the beginning of the Passion narrative. And he goes the day before he goes to the cross. And, couldn't you imagine just being on pins and needles when he washes their feet? He sets that aside and he says, now, whatever followed that moment, if he started with now, you probably could have heard a pin drop. And he said, I'm going to give you a new command, which is John 13:34. Love one another. And then he kind of gives a little mini homily on that by saying, by this, everyone will know you're my followers if you love one another. Full stop. And he doesn't say, if you go to this church, if you believe this about who should be in the White House, if you, if you cross yourself 12 times a day, and I occasionally cross myself in my worship, if you burn incense, how much of the Bible you've memorized, all of those things, they may be part and parcel of your faith. No, if you want to share the story, love one another. And boy, could we not use that in our world today. And no doubt. These people get that, and they all talk about it.
Listen, loving one another is the key, right? I mean, we're all different, different places, different people. You're exactly right there. I mean, love, the old saying, love conquers all. I mean, that's the example I take from Christ, is his love for people, right? No judgment, right? And there's so much judgment out there in this world, as you know. We're not the ones that need to be doing that, right? If we just love one another like he asked us to, things would be so much better.
Yeah. We all know, because you're younger than I am, but we all seen at the football games or the baseball games, somebody holding up John 3:16, which is a wonderful verse. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that all who believe in him will not perish but have life everlasting. I think they should hold up John 3:17 as well.
Yeah. Where
Jesus says, I did not come into the world to condemn the world. I came into the world to save the world.
Yeah, no doubt.
And he said, when I'm lifted up, I'll draw everybody. He says, I'll draw all people to myself. And I'm not going to be the one to decide what his definition of all is. Mm-hmm. So I really, at the time in which we live, the thing that kind of spurred me to write the book, Witness to Belief, was here are 12 people who really spoke in loving, tender, powerful, inspirational ways about their faith. And I realized we're coming up on I thought about it, as did the publisher of Morehouse. We're coming up on the Christmas season. You want to give people something to think about during Christmas? Read these 12 stories of people who are following that carpenter who was born 2,000 years ago.
Listen, congratulations on this book. What an amazing book. I cannot wait to see how well it does. And I pray that it gets out there to the people that need to read it, and people are inspired by it. And I know they will be. I know they will be without a doubt. So where can people buy the book? Say they want to buy that as a gift. Where can they find it?
Sure. As I said, I've got my copy, but mine was an advanced copy. So it is. It will release the first week of October. It is already available, on Barnes and Noble, at Morehouse, the publisher's website. Books A Million, and they've been wonderful. They're showing up at a lot of places. I'm doing a book tour starting next week. Certainly Amazon and Target and Walmart, those places where you buy books online, and hopefully in people's local bookstores. My understanding is a lot of independent bookstores are going to pick it up for their Christmas season. Share
your website. Where can the listener or watcher of this podcast find you?
Russ Levenson, and I do have a Facebook page. As much as you and I just talked about social media, I'm not somebody who interacts with it's more there for information than conversation. I really, as we just said, I'd much rather somebody go out and pick up a book and read it than spend a lot of time on the internet trying to find out about it. I hope they will. And there's a lot, actually on the Amazon page alone, there's a good bit of some really very kind endorsements by some people, including a hero of mine, Greg Boyle, who started Homeboy Industries, a Jesuit priest out in California, the largest ministry to inner city gangs in the world. And he read it and gave me a nice little word there. But then you have 12 people who endorsed it by their presence. So I just hope that's the best way the word gets out.
Russ, again, congratulations. Thank you for all you're doing. You're an amazing person, and I cannot thank you enough for taking time to come on the podcast and talk about this amazing book with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for all you do.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Go Forth and Golf Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to receive alerts on new episodes. For more information, please follow us on social media at Go Forth Golf Instruction or visit our website at goforthgolfinstruction.com. Remember, together, let's go forth to a better golf game.